Welcome, Fright Night Vault listeners. Tonight I bring you to the wilderness, far from highways and houses, where the silence of the forest presses heavy and the sky spreads wider than the imagination can bear. Some shadows haunt the corners of old houses, but others drift far above, carried on lights that do not belong to the stars. It was summer when the Maine woods grew thick with pine and the air carried the resinous scent of sap and damp earth. Lakes lay hidden between the trees like dark mirrors still by day, but at night reflecting skies filled with endless points of light. For most, these woods offered escape, a place where campers came to fish, to drink, to leave the noise of towns behind. 4 men came here in just that spirit. Friends, bonded by youth and curiosity, they sought days of fishing and nights of firelit laughter beneath the canopy of stars. They carried canoes and supplies deep into the wilderness, farther than most dared travel, until the only sounds were the calls of loons and the rustle of wind through branches. Theirs was no hurried trip. Days passed quietly, with fish pulled from the waters, stories told over crackling fires, the smell of smoke clinging to their clothes. But as dusk fell one night and the fire dipped low, their attention was drawn skyward. A light moved across the trees. At first, they thought it a star, brighter than the rest but natural, harmless. Yet this star drifted against the patterns, slid silently in ways no star should. It pulsed faintly, as though it were breathing. The men whispered, laughed nervously, trying to dismiss it. Satellites, they said, aircraft. But the light stopped. It hung in place, steady, bright. And then, with no sound, it descended. The forest grew unnaturally quiet. The chirp of insects, the croak of frogs, the distant call of owls, all of it stilled. Only the sound of their own breathing, sharp and anxious, filled the air. The light hung low over the treetops now, glowing with an intensity that seemed to burn into their eyes. It was not a lantern, nor a flare. Its edges were too sharp, its movements too deliberate. They watched it hover, then slide silently over the lake, its reflection glimmering in the black water. The men felt an unease they could not name. Some urged retreat, to douse the fire, to leave the thing unacknowledged. But curiosity won. They decided to investigate, to paddle out onto the water, carrying with them nothing but their canoe and the uneasy thrill that comes with chasing the unknown. The lake was still, their paddles dipping quietly. The light drifted farther across the water, as if leading them. It pulsed again, stronger now, its glow reflecting on the ripples their canoe left behind. And though none of them would admit it at first, each man felt the same thought stir in his chest. The light was aware of them, watching, waiting. When they reached the center of the lake, the glow grew so strong it painted their skin with pallid light, their eyes wide, their mouths dry. The object was closer now, close enough that its form could be seen. Not a star, not a plane, but a craft. Its surface gleamed metallic, its edges curved in ways the human mind was not built to fully describe. No sound came from it. No wind stirred the water below, only the presence, vast, deliberate, oppressive. And then the light grew brighter still. The last thing they remembered clearly was the glow engulfing them, erasing the night, bleaching the trees and water in stark white. Their paddles fell silent against the canoe. The world itself seemed to vanish in that light. When awareness returned, they were still on the lake, but the fire they had left burning was now nearly gone, its coals faint. What had been minutes felt like hours. Time had slipped. Their bodies were sore, their heads heavy with fatigue. None of them spoke. None of them dared. It would take years before they fully admitted what happened in the moments swallowed by that light. And when the memories came back, they did not come gently. The days that followed the light on the lake were wrapped in silence. The 4 men tried to bury the memory, to reduce it to a trick of fatigue, the fever of too much drink and wilderness isolation. But the silence between them grew heavy. No one dared to laugh about it. No one dared to ask the others what they had truly seen. They carried on with their trip, but the woods felt altered. At night, they sensed the trees leaning closer, the stars sharper, as if the sky itself were aware of them. The fire no longer gave comfort. The crackle of wood seemed too loud against the stillness, and each man found his eyes darting toward the dark horizon, expecting the glow to return. The first unease crept into their dreams. Each awoke at different hours, sweating, gasping, unable to remember what terror had jolted them awake. They spoke little of it, but all bore the same look of exhaustion, their eyes sunken, their voices muted. It was as if the lake itself had stolen something from them. On their final night in the woods, they sat around the embers of their fire, unable to shake the memory. The one who had held the flashlight to signal the light on the lake admitted he no longer remembered how long it had burned. The batteries, he swore, should not have lasted so long, yet the beam had pierced the sky for what seemed like an eternity. The others stared at him, uneasy, realizing in that moment how much of the night had gone missing from their minds. When they returned from their trip, they did not speak much of it, but the unease clung. The days that followed were marked by strange sensations. The feeling of being watched, the scent of ozone lingering with no storm, shadows shifting against ceilings when no car passed outside. And the dreams worsened. Each of them described in private dreams of narrow rooms lit by an unnatural glow, of figures gathered around them, of hands, not human hands, touching their skin. The dreams were too similar, too precise for coincidence. Time passed, but the memories did not fade. Instead, they sharpened. One remembered lying on a table, his chest heavy, unable to move, though his mind remained awake. Another spoke of instruments gleaming under sterile light and the cold touch of metal against his skin. A third described figures with elongated heads and eyes blacker than void, bending close, their faces devoid of expression, yet brimming with purpose. They had never spoken these details aloud to one another, and yet, when they finally did, their stories wove together seamlessly, each describing what the others had seen. Years later, unable to endure the unanswered questions, they submitted to hypnosis. One by one, their minds were opened, and the fragments came rushing back. They described the canoe, the bright light, the sensation of floating, though no water moved beneath them. They were lifted, weightless, into the craft. Inside was a chamber, curved walls that seemed alive, pulsing faintly as though the very structure breathed. The air was thick, metallic, heavy in their lungs. They were not alone. Figures moved with deliberate steps, tall and thin, their heads too large for their narrow bodies, their eyes like pools of oil, swallowing every glimmer of light. These beings did not speak, yet their intentions pressed against the men's thoughts, heavy and commanding. The friends were separated, each guided down different halls, each left on a table beneath the glow of instruments that seemed forged from no earthly metal. What they recalled next would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The memories, once unlocked, came with violent clarity. Each of the men spoke of being placed on tables within the craft, their limbs heavy as stone, their bodies refusing to obey the frantic commands of their minds. They were awake, aware, but powerless. Only their eyes shifted, darting to glimpse the figures surrounding them. The beings were unlike anything of Earth. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched thin across delicate bones. Their heads loomed large, tapering at the chin, their mouths narrow and lipless, their noses little more than ridges. But their eyes, immense, black, reflective, devoured everything. No glint of compassion, no trace of humanity, only endless void. One of the men remembered cold hands pressing against his temples. He felt a presence enter his mind, rifling through his thoughts as though they were nothing but pages in a book. Memories of childhood, of family, of shame and joy alike, all stripped bare, examined, discarded. He wept, not from pain, but from the violation of having his very self unraveled. Another spoke of instruments descending from the ceiling, sharp and gleaming, though no machinery moved to hold them. They hovered as though controlled by thought alone. One sank toward his arm, piercing flesh without blood. A burning sensation spread through his veins, and he screamed, though no sound left his throat. The beings watched without emotion, their black eyes never wavering. A third described a device placed over his chest. A sensation like fire and ice surged through him, his heartbeat thundered in his ears, and he swore he felt something leave his body. A thread of light, pulled upward, examined, then pushed back within him. When the device lifted away, he lay trembling, unsure if what had been returned was truly his own soul. The last remembered a figure bending close, its face inches from his own. The eyes filled his vision, swallowing all else. He could not blink. He could not look away. Within those eyes he saw stars wheeling, galaxies spinning, as though the void itself had been carved into their gaze. He felt himself falling into them, falling forever, until darkness consumed him. They each recalled the sound, not of voices, but of thoughts pressed against their minds in whispers that were not words, commands that were not language. They understood only fragments, observation, study, use. They were not guests. They were specimens. One remembered the pain most vividly. A needle, impossibly thin, sliding toward his eye. He could not move, could not flinch, as it pressed against the soft, white, piercing deep. His vision filled with red, then black. When it withdrew, his sight returned. But something inside him felt changed, as though a piece of him had been marked, claimed. When the procedures ended, the men were led back together, their bodies moving like puppets. They floated down the curved halls, back toward the chamber where the light pulsed brighter than ever. None spoke. None dared resist. The light engulfed them once more. They felt themselves lowered, weightless, drifting. The smell of pine and water returned. The canoe rocked beneath them. The fire they had left burning on the shore was now nothing but embers. Time had vanished. Minutes had stretched into hours, hours into nothing. They sat in silence, gripping the canoe's edges, their eyes locked on the water rather than the sky. The craft was gone. Only the reflection of stars remained, but the stars seemed colder now, as if they stared back. None of them spoke of it that night. But none of them would ever again know the safety of darkness. The canoe touched shore in silence. The men dragged it across the pebbled bank, their bodies sluggish, their movements clumsy, as though strings still pulled against their bones. They collapsed by the remains of the fire, staring into the embers, none willing to speak of the blank stretch of hours that had vanished. In the days that followed, they returned to their lives, but the memory clung like a bruise that would not fade. Time felt fractured. They woke in the night, drenched in sweat, the echo of eyes staring down at them from impossible heights. Each man carried dreams he could not escape, long corridors of light, tables cold as stone, hands that touched but did not comfort. For years they kept it buried, but the truth gnawed at them. Their silence could not mask the scars left behind. When at last they submitted to hypnosis, the fragments sharpened into memory, and it was then they realized the weight of their shared experience. They had not imagined it. They had not dreamed it. They had been taken. The sessions revealed the same images, the same figures, the same procedures, described in voices trembling but certain. 4 men, bound not just by friendship, but by a night when the sky reached down and claimed them. Their accounts never wavered. They spoke of the chamber, the beings, the needles, the eyes. They spoke of time lost, of lives altered. They spoke of the silence that followed, a silence heavier than any sound. The Allagash abductions became one of the most infamous cases in modern lore, studied, debated, doubted, believed. But belief is no shield. What they endured remains carved into them, a mark that no skeptic can erase. The story you just heard is no invention. You can look it up. The incident is called the Allagash abductions. When you look into the night sky, you may tell yourself that the stars are distant, harmless, eternal, but the men on that lake know better. They know some of those lights are watching, waiting, returning. If you made it this far, you're one of us. Subscribe so you don't miss what crawls out next. The vault never sleeps, and neither do the things that drift above it. see you on the next. If you have ever woken with time missing, with shadows pressed against your walls, with dreams that feel more like memories, share your story below. For one night, it may be your tale that burns in the candlelight of the vault.